Mental health is an invisible thing, but it touches all of us at some point or another. It's part of life. A quote by Kevin Love, an NBA basketball player.
Hi, welcome to our podcast episode titled The Invisible Game, where we will be talking about how sports can lead to anxiety, suicide, and depression. We're both current high school athletes, and we're here to connect with you. In 2019, it was found that 35% of the best athletes struggle with their mental health. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among student athletes from ages 15 to 24. And in a 2021 Centers for Disease Control and Prevention survey, 40% of teenagers said they felt persistently sad or hopeless. And the exercise that quote unquote makes them happy actually makes them more prone to depressive episodes.
The sense of failure in their sports, as well as the pressure coaches, parents, and the player puts on themselves, creates a constant state of anxiety. It causes people to feel as if they're not good enough. Although non-athletes don't see it as a failure or see the sport as just a game, the athletes tend to see the failure as detrimental.
In the sport we play, like softball, there's a lot of pressure from coaches, teammates, spectators, parents, anybody that judge how we play. And I mean, being at the level we play at now and the level that I'm going to play at, it creates almost a negative sense of self, creates like anxiety before games or actually during games. Like my first at bat, I will literally be hyperventilating, like shaking, and that's all just due to the fear of like failure. And
Yeah.
it's seen as like something I guess I wouldn't be open about with coaches, and we need to like open this conversation up to how you can remove that sense of like, oh my god, if I don't do this, I'm going to get like benched or I might die.
Yeah. No, yeah. Like, it's the way that the system and like the games are, or not the games, like the teams and the structure of the teams are set up that like coaches that take you out after one bad performance, they're setting up that anxiety for failure or like to fail.
Yeah, and
You
like
know?
that constant fear that everyone's disappointed in you. Like, I mean, you can see it in professional sports, just like how social media will like treat a player after they have a bad game. And it's like almost like we're not at the professional level, but we have the same sense of like judgment, I guess. And it totally depends on like who your parents are and like how much you actually care about the sport. But like if you feel like everyone else cares, even if they might not, it's going to like detrimental to your health.
Oh
So
yeah, like even the people that just aren't, we just think everyone is
yeah, it's like social
because you
anxiety.
are. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
because you're judging yourself. You assume everyone else is doing the same thing.
And that's honestly shouldn't be how sports are, because it's not how you perform in a sport isn't gonna kill you.
No, it doesn't define anything except for the sport.
Yeah.
That's
Which is totally something that should be talked about more within coaches. Like the sense of the fact that your coach is relying on you will help you pursue higher things and be more successful. But overall, that will only reach a certain point, and everyone fails. So putting that constant pressure on yourself is just not healthy. And I mean, the best way to deal with that is just to have the positive mindset. Like, I will succeed, and and if I don't, there's always another opportunity.
yeah. One at bat isn't going to define everything. It's not life or death at one time. It's not hit or miss. You suck or you're good. It's just part of the game, which is not taught in when you're younger. It needs to be. I think it needs to be literally like it needs to be instilled when you're like youth sports, like minors levels, little leagues. Like that's when those kind of things, and like young travel teams too. But like that's when that's when those ideas need to be implemented.
Yeah, totally. Because when I was coaching, that was something I would preach to. Like, they'd strike out and they'd come in all angry, and I'd be telling them that there's always going to be another chance, and that at this level, no one's judging you, so there's no reason to be super upset about your failures. And just, it's more important at that age to celebrate their successes, no matter how small, because if you give them a complex, they just don't grow. Like I would see players, and definitely with the coach I coached with recently, like he was so mean, and these girls like they just were so down on themselves all the time, which honestly didn't make them better players, and honestly just made them worse.
Yeah, absolutely. But my little league team was, I gotta say, I sucked. There was a season where I didn't. There was a season where I didn't get a single hit until the last game, and my team like continued to cheer me on and tell me that they believed in me and that I could do it. And then I actually did do it in a very important part of the game, might I add. But okay,
Subtle
this was
flex,
also
subtle flex.
we're also like 12, but it's the thought that counts. And it's just like having those kind of coaches, those kind of teammates is what led to me not completely giving up on myself and saying, oh, I just can't do it. I didn't give up because of the environment, and I think that like every team needs that kind of environment so every kid can actually succeed.
Yeah, and when you think about it in like the long term, like if you might have not had that support, you might not be playing softball still now. And like to think like of how a way a sport can like shape, like not even just your mental health, but your physical health. Like every single thing that happens when we're younger completely will change how our future is. And the fact that you still are playing the sport senior year and at the varsity level when you couldn't even hit the ball when you were younger, it kind of like it just shows how that positive team and that constant sense of that they're going to support you no matter what just push you forwards.
This is an interview with Eric Colpitz, a former baseball player and current youth softball coach.
With a sport like softball and baseball, where most of it's failure, how do you think this can impact people?
So failure, I try to, the way I look at failure is failure should be looked at as a positive. Um, I think good coaches can turn the failure element in sports into a positive, but unfortunately, and especially with the state of things right now, that's not the case. So failure right now to me is the number one cause of stress and all sorts of stuff on the mental health side with kids right now.
Because it's like, I don't know, pressure, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, well, the pressure to fail is pretty much so. If I had a team, I've had tons of teams like this already. If there is zero, I call them front runners. I called that group of kids front runners. If there is no pressure, even if it's a good team that we were playing against, if there was no pressure, they played like they belonged in the top 10 in the country. If all of a sudden there was pressure, even against a worse team, they didn't perform. And all of that's from the top down. That is from when they started. That's parent driven. That's coach driven. That's everything. So failure is huge. The fear to fail is pretty much what drives everything.
Yeah, like the performance anxiety almost.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So how have you seen mental health issues presented in your own athletes, like the people you coach?
Yeah, well, I guess I just kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
The main thing I don't I've been trying to figure out where it's coming from. It's obviously it starts at home. So if you have parents that don't have the right value system, that's immediately going to throw everything off. So I've seen good kids get ruined. I've seen bad kids get elevated in a good system. So for me, that's why if you listen to a lot of coaches, a lot of them always say scout the parents. If you scout the parents and they're good parents, you usually have good, balanced kids. That's what I've found. It usually starts at home.
Yeah, so it doesn't stem from the sport itself. It's like it's just because of the kids, or not the kids, the parents and like the atmosphere they're in.
Definitely not the sport. I mean, sports have been around forever, and sports are a microcosm of society. So when you play sports, you have good people, you have bad people, you have nice people, you have mean people, you have physical people, you have soft people. When you play sports, you see everything that's in the world. So I don't think sports creates anything. I think the atmosphere that a kid is put in usually will determine how things go. And for me, that starts at home. I haven't met a kid with a good home base that has had many problems like that.
Okay, yeah. When you played baseball, did you like have like any issues, and like how would you recommend someone like push through issues, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so full disclosure, I take anxiety medicine now. I wish I knew about it then. And this is coming from a guy, I'm like, you know me. I am very like anti-pharma, anti-healthcare system. So like,
Yeah.
if I need it, it's real. So like, I wish I had it when I was a kid. So before every game, I threw up. Like
Oh my
literally before,
God.
yeah, before every single game. And it turned into just the thing where it was like, okay, yep, and then just move on.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah, when I tell most kids that, they're like, "What?" So I know all about that pressure. Um, Normally for me, the way I help kids get through it is lightening it. There's always ways to lighten it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be humor, but any way that you can lighten the moment and make somebody realize that this isn't life and death. I know that's kind of cliche, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, no, because like if you hit the ball or not doesn't mean you're gonna like die. So
Right. Like I mean, uh, Junior told me this, and I thought this was amazing. He was like, if you get up 100 times, are you going to miss 100? The answer is obviously no. If you get up 100 times and you hit 100, is that going to happen? No. So if you get up there and miss once, what's the big deal? You know what I mean? When you
yeah,
think about it, big picture, what's the big deal?
like
So
there's always another opportunity.
exactly, like just light in the moment, and when you can light in the moment, that's when kids shine. That's what you try to draw out as a coach.
Or how would you recommend someone deals with their own anxieties in the sport they're playing?
So I would just say having someone to lean on and remembering why they're there. It's just a sport. They're there to have fun. They're there to get better. They're not there to be perfect. You can't be perfect. Like they're just it's not that deep basically. It's not that big of a deal, especially at the younger ages. Really emphasize the fact that it's not.
Yeah, and I would say the best way to do that is positive self-talk, or just basically setting up a vision in your head of you succeeding, and then positively talking yourself into it. And the big thing that like every coach has probably ever said in the world is to believe in yourself. And I think that really just comes from hyping yourself up, even if you're just like whispering to yourself like you got this, blah 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 blah. It like doesn't matter what you're saying as long as it's positive, because if you're always gonna think negatively, like you walk into that box and you're like, I'm gonna strike out no matter what, or you're a football player and you go in and you think you're just gonna drop the ball no matter what. Like that negative mindset never will ever lead to you succeeding. And that's something that every coach will preach, and mainly it's up to the player themselves, because I've definitely like a lot of people I've played with over the years would be like, this pitcher's too good. We have no chance. We're gonna lose. This team's really good. They seem really good. Blah 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 blah. And if we go into it thinking that, we normally lost pretty badly, which honestly
Yeah.
sucks. It sucks, but at the same time, I mean, at EO, like last year we went against Newtown, and yeah, they beat up on us, but we still played pretty freaking good. But yeah,
No, we played really well.
yeah, and that all came from like I guess how our captains at the time motivated us into it, and how we never gave up, and that's
No,
all
yeah.
just the positive outlook on everything. Like, yeah, we gave up 4 home runs, but at the same time we held one of the best teams in the state to only only 10 runs, but we
Hey,
still put,
they could have done a lot more.
yeah, they could have
But
mercied us.
I agree with you though. It was from like success that we had in that game, even the little things, literally just came from the setup that, like you said, the captains, the coaches, the environment that we created the rest of the season.
Yeah, and we knew going in that we had a low shot of winning, but we didn't let that show when we were playing. And we definitely didn't let that show in the dugout or the locker room or wherever we started out, because just talking like that will just never lead to success. And obviously we lost still, but there's other games where we went against Enfield, who's beat us every single year, and we finally went into it thinking we'd win, and we did. And that just
Yeah.
goes to show the the positive headspace that being in a healthy environment can create for people to fully be themselves and fully reach their full potential.
Yeah, no, if a player doesn't feel comfortable on a team, they're not going to perform well.
Which, I mean, I
In my
guess you
opinion.
could say is not much of an issue in the younger sports, because I feel like girls are always just super positive because I mean,
Yeah, most of the time, yeah.
yeah, they don't have any worries, and I feel like we start to lose that once we reach high school age, and pressures such as college or schoolwork or outside stuff just will completely destroy someone. And the sport's supposed to be the safe space, but then once you put in the added pressure of, if I don't succeed, I'll be benched, they lose that. And people start to have a negative outlook on every single aspect of their life, which I don't really know how we should battle that. How should we as society help people deal with that?
If we look at the professional level, the big athletes, like the athletes that kids like idolize, they always say they want to be when they grow up, those athletes should become more open about their own struggles so people know that it's okay to have the struggles and that everyone has the struggles. And if they choose, they can say how they came over it or how they got around those struggles, just to encourage kids to push past the struggles. So, because there's a lot of kids now that just quit once they hit struggles because they don't know how to deal with it, and they think they're the only ones that have it because nobody's really open about it. So, like I say, if we bring the open atmosphere up to the professional levels where people want to be when they grow up, that'll help the youth also develop those same mindsets to get them there.
Yeah, and as we see it now, we see athletes have big, crazy stats, and they'll be Heisman Trophy winners and MVPs and I don't know, the World Series winners, and you think, oh wow, they're so good, they don't struggle, they're literally just playing a sport, and we never really get to hear their perspective on it, and you have to dive deep to find it because people only show them being confident in themselves. And I think this is a big issue because a lot of young children, like I would say me myself, like I looked up to these big, crazy good softball players when I was growing up, and they never messed up. And it put in this thought in my mind that an error's wrong, and it will be it just there's no point in playing if you're not any good. And it really takes away from just the positive light of sports. And I would say most people believe that sports are something that's supposed to be fun, an area that kids go to enrich themselves, and they get into better colleges from them. But at the same time, they all also are super mentally damaging. And if the professional athletes could just be open about it, we'd finally start to see some change just from the bottom up.
You know, like the documentaries about these big players that go back into when they were like their childhood and
Yeah,
like it's just a documentary about them. I think those are like so helpful to kids if they watch them because I know in most of them they do talk about struggles they've had.
yeah,
A lot of them are also struggles that don't even apply to the sport. They're like home life struggles that affected them in their sport and how they got around it. And like I think kids should just watch more. Like
yeah,
they should make more of them and they should be more popular and I think it would help a lot.
yeah. I completely agree with that. And the Aaron Rodgers one that I've recently watched some of, like he shows how meditation has completely changed his outlook on sport. He has his meditation, and he goes on these retreats to just fully think about everything deeply. And it's really great to see that mindset in some cool football player, because you would never really think that they themselves would struggle mentally with anything, because Like, why would they need to? They make millions of dollars a year just to play. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, you know what else? There's like it's becoming a bigger thing like really recently of like sports teams having a therapist that they hire and that works with their athletes. Physical therapists, mental therapists, like there's people that are specifically studied for that kind of stuff. And I think that's it's just a great addition to any level of the sport because it automatically gives everybody a person to talk to that will help them through their struggles if they don't have that in like any other spot in any other place in their life.
yeah, and I think there's a stigma around therapists that should be talked about more because, like, nowadays everyone's just like in therapy and that's fine. Obviously, that's something you should advocate for is someone to have someone to go and talk to that's not their family member and they're not going to feel judged and it's an open space. And I would say from personal experience from my own parents, like it's not a comfortable topic in the world still on needing a therapist because they only see it for those who are super mentally unwell, while someone who could be perfectly fine but still have certain issues that need to be talked about. And I mean, connecting this back to sports, having that super safe place to just go to, like, oh my God, I had a really bad game. I want to talk about it, but I know my parents are mad at me because of how I did. Um, and that's obviously added pressure. So you're not going to want to go and talk to them. So having that team therapist is such a good thing for even the most mentally healthy people.
Yeah. I think the other biggest like problem with the stigma around therapists is that people think of someone having a therapist, they think of them like needing them like every week, every other day. Like they think of them going there often. Like they always think that they can't function without them. But like you don't if you like for these teams, they don't need to see them that often. You could see them once a month. You could see them like you don't have to see them very often. You could see them only when you need to. It's things like that. And like if you take that same ideas and apply it to a team where they don't feel obligated to go. They only go if they need to. That just makes it, I feel like it would make it such a safer place too. There's no obligation for anything. You just go and talk about what you need to talk about.
I think that's a big issue with society as itself because the big cases of mental health are like portrayed in media like super poorly. So you'll see movies showcasing these people as crazy while all small amounts of cases and the large majority just are struggling with their own like anxiety or depressive episodes and that's obviously not making them crazy. They're just a normal person and the way media portrays people struggling with these issues doesn't make the idea of therapy or just coming to terms with it as uh, a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they just see it, even the athletes, they just see it as something that only you need if you're like, I don't want to sound really bad, but like really crazy.
Yeah,
Like these
like you're
really insane
psychotic.
people. Yeah, these really insane people are the people that they hear about, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not at that level. I don't like." People are gonna think that I'm like that. Like, no, you don't have to be at a certain level to get a therapist. Just it's just something that I think many
Yeah,
people would
and
benefit
that
from,
that, that
especially
can
athletes.
we can kind of connect that to social media today and how that's such an issue and definitely in the sports industry because how you're portrayed by the media will impact how everyone cheers for you, sees you, and if you're like a nobody and you mess up once, all of a sudden you're this meme on the internet, and honestly, the small mistakes that people make fun of are just not okay. And I would say this year we saw with the World Series and the Yankees like blew that fifth inning, and they're making all these errors. And when you think about it, they made errors. It's part of life. Like everyone messes up. And there's no reason that I should be seeing months later memes about, what's his face? Judge dropping the pop up and like, when you just wait for the ball to drop in New York. Like that's crazy. Like this guy just messed up once and he doesn't need to be hated on for his one bad performance when he performed well all year. And this one mistake is just causing so much hate to go towards him, which I think is honestly one of the leading causes of the mental health issues in athletes. Definitely professional athletes and collegiate athletes, because they're filmed and they're put online for mean people to judge.
No, yeah, absolutely. Because like mistakes are just part of the game, and people, the viewers that like don't play sports or don't play that sport at a high enough level to kind of understand the pressures, are always like, "Oh, that was so easy." Even the easiest plays can become the most stressful plays in a stressful game, and you can't control. You can't like mistakes can happen at any game. Just because it's a high level game doesn't mean mistakes are less or more likely to happen. They can happen whenever. That felt kind of wrong.
What felt wrong?
I said that they're not more likely to happen. In stressful games, they actually are a little bit more likely to happen, but
Well, I wouldn't say
I guess
mistakes are
doesn't.
more likely to happen at the professional level, but I would say that the mistakes are more likely to be focused on than the successes, which is, I think, is honestly sad, because being at the highest level as you possibly can in anything is such a competitive field, and like, we don't judge like other jobs as harshly as we judge athletes, which kind of just goes into how society's built.
So it's like it's basketball season, and I watched the college basketball and stuff. And I was just thinking about like the announcers that the viewers are hearing, and what they say really does affect not the athletes directly, but kind of what happens around like certain plays or certain mistakes that happen. If the announcers are focusing and saying like, "Oh, that's gonna affect the whole game. Like that was a big mistake. You can't make that." Like I've heard announcers say like, "Oh, they can't be making that mistake." Like you're putting that idea into the viewers, and then it's just going back towards the athletes. It's not helpful. But I've also heard announcers when people make a mistake, they're like they say that it's obviously not good for the team or whatever. But then they also say they're like, "Oh, but this player's been doing so good all game. Like keep that in mind. They're not a bad player. It's a good player."
Yeah, and
That's
I
kind
would
of
say this is what creates like a viewer's mindset on a player, and we can connect this to the anxiety rates. The like an anxiety type, like competitive anxiety, is just like almost the fear of playing in front of other people, and the fear of their evaluation, and the fear of the positive or negative outlook they're going to have on you just because of how you performed on this certain day. And I think it's insanely hard to perform at high levels and then have an announcer that doesn't play the sport and doesn't really know the person or seem to care about them as a human, and just does it as entertainment. Could just be like, well, they would make this 99% of the time and they failed here. Like, saying stuff like that just creates this super negative outlook that the viewers putting on the player, which causes high levels of stress and will lead to repeated failures and things like we'll see. um I don't know much about basketball, but like a player messes up a few shots in one game, they have a bad game. So the next game, they've seen all this media hating on them. They might actually play worse than that one, and it just keeps going. It's just a continuous cycle of downfalls, which I
I
think social media completely facilitates.
absolutely. I mean, I could take a specific player from the UConn women's basketball team. Um, I know KK Arnold. She's getting a lot of hate recently because she just like wasn't like she was not performing bad at all. Like she was doing fine. She just wasn't performing her best, which is absolutely normal. It happens to everyone. And people were telling her, like, people were leaving hate comments. They were leaving hate comments to her family about it. And I just think that that's insane. That obviously doesn't help. And I know that the stat team specifically, they've said before that when they don't look at the comments, they stay off of social media for those reasons. They don't want to see stuff like that because it doesn't help them. But I just thought of an example for you, and it's just a pretty kind of crazy example to me.
Yeah, and I mean, this you can, the mindset of staying off of social media just to avoid the conflict is actually very healthy. Like, I wish definitely at younger levels, you don't have that social media to just avoid. You have your parents or your coaches that will yell at you or will just be like, I'm disappointed, and you can't hide from that. But once you get to the level where you can hide from it, it's not even exactly hiding. It's just, oh my
You're
God,
just
sorry.
avoiding it. You're
Yeah,
avoiding the unnecessary comments,
yeah,
the unnecessary negative thoughts that you don't
because
want, that are
this,
not good for you.
this is just the positive, thinking and the positive mindset, and why would we let other people's opinion sway how we feel, which I think is actually really good on what's her name, KK Arnold, to just avoid
Yeah.
it.
I'm pretty sure she might have said something because that specific stuff got to a level where you kind of can't ignore it. Just the problem with professional and it's more for college athletes because they're still young. They're not
Yeah, they're still kids
they're
and
not
they're in
professional
school.
athletes. Yeah,
They're
they
they're
still
they're
got
going
friends.
home and they're doing their homework.
Yeah,
It's not
they're
their whole
almost
life.
they're almost as impressionable as high school kids. They're just a little less because just a little more mature.
Yeah, their prefrontal cortex is more developed. All right, I want to connect this social media aspect to, I guess, stress, because the the added pressures of other people will create stress, and the ability to prepare for stressful situations is extremely important for any athlete. And a study done by Dr. Richard Lazarus, an American psychologist and author, called the transactional model of stress and coping, was used to detect challenging situations in an athlete's life. And this allowed him to discover how an athlete interprets stressful situations. So in this research, they discovered 7 main coping strategies that are used by athletes. So these are coping with adversity, coachability, concentration, confidence, and achievement motivation, goal setting, peaking under pressure, and freedom from worry. And it's worth noting that research so far has not shown which strategy is optimal. So when we want to think about how we're going to approach the sport ourselves, we just want to think what will mainly work for us. So I would say for me, mainly confidence and being able to be coached, no matter if it's negative or positive, is such a positive effect on how I succeed. But you per se could have a completely different mindset. And I think this is important for everyone just to learn how to properly handle their own stress and put it into a positive outlet. So how would you choose to manage your own stress?
I think I don't really know what these exactly are, but the freedom from worry sounds like it's kind of what I do. I just I especially when I'm getting stressed when I'm getting worked up in the box or when I'm up to bat or anything like that in the field, I just have to remind myself that it's not life or death, that I'm gonna be fine no matter what the outcome of whatever I'm doing is. And just I like to remind myself that I've been doing this since I was 5 years old. I know how to do it. I have to kind of make myself believe that I can do it. Whether I really believe it or not, I just kind of tell myself over and over again, you can do it. You've been doing this forever. You've been doing this your whole life. You know how to. You just have to, stop thinking about it. You just kind of got to do it. That's kind of how I just kind of, wipe my mind, really.
So
I keep the importance.
it's living in almost a worry-free world, I guess.
Yeah, when I'm in a sport, definitely. I try to stay worry free. I forget about anything that doesn't relate, everything outside the sport, especially. And then remind yourself it's not that deep. You know how to do this. You're good.
Yeah, and obviously, while this might not work for most people, it works for the majority of athletes. And I feel anyone who's perfectly happy in a sport is obviously not really in it. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, you've kind of touched on this, but how can coaches and your teammates support each other in managing their mental health?
communication is number one. Is soon, I think that's communication and honesty are like the two driving factors of everything I believe in. So if you have a team that can trust each other, they can communicate with each other, and they're honest with each other, mental health becomes almost non-existent because you're all so in tune with each other and you can let each other know, oh, I'm freaking or whatever. And eventually, I mean, I'm sure you even know, I'm sure you can tell when one of your teammates is getting freaked. And as a teammate, you go over there and help them out, calm them down, whatever it is that they need. But for me, honesty, communication, those are huge. You got to be able to talk, right?
Yeah, like, cause I'll always like, I'll look out for like my teammates and like you see them, they'll strike out and then everyone like, it goes downhill from there.
Right.
So like the best choice of action is, I guess, just be there for each other.
Yeah.
Cause I mean, everyone's going through the same thing. So it doesn't help in the long run to be like, I guess, upset with your teammate because they didn't get the hit that you wanted. Like, it's
And I can
all,
speak, from experience where I guarantee you don't know stuff that's going on at home with all of your teammates. And some of the stuff is like real life, like bad stuff that you wouldn't want to know about or ever want to go through. And these kids still go to school and they show up and they play sports. Like, you really, when you're on a team, it's that team or nothing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
You really gotta buy into it.
Yeah, like sports are an outlet for someone to like express themselves, or escape anything that they're struggling with
For sure.
in real world. And obviously there's issues like within sports with pressures on athletes or toxic atmospheres that cause like that outlet to just disappear. It's no
Yeah.
longer available.
And then it becomes, I mean, that's worse. The one safe haven you have, it turns into a toxic environment. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been on a super toxic team, but it sucks the fun out of the sport. That's why so many kids are quitting now.
Yeah, definitely in
So,
like high school age. I mean, I've never been on a toxic team, but obviously being on a team I am on right now where everyone's kind of checked out,
right,
it takes away from like how you're supposed to feel about the sport. Like
right.
it's like a lack of motivation, I guess, is the biggest thing I see, but it's from everyone's like getting either drained or just uninterested in general,
Yeah. It
which
usually, I mean, this has kind of always been the case, though. I don't think this is something that'll change. I mean, a lot of people check out when they're seniors,
yeah. It's just like
but
they've been doing it for so long that at the point, like they're just doing it because it's like, I mean, I know like in case it's just a piece like for her parents because they spend
right.
so much money. So you find people in the sports world that are literally just playing not for themselves, but like for their parents because they spent a lot of money. And then you'll also see that like effect in their performance as well as like I guess their like mental attitude because they just get so shut down, I guess, at every practice or game,
Yeah,
which
burnout is very real. I mean, it's right now in softball, burnout, and it shows up in tons of different ways. This 12-year-old that I was all excited to coach, she quit the sport. 12 years old.
12?
12. 12 years
That's
old.
crazy because you have so much, you haven't even
You don't
played the
even know
sport
what
for
travel
real yet.
you don't even know what travel softball is at 12 yet.
Like,
Like you're just discovering it.
that's so upsetting. Like,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
I feel like almost it's the atmosphere today because of social media and like other interests in like everyone's lives that they're getting taken away from like the positives and they're only looking at the negatives and they're looking at like, well, I could be doing this instead. And it just like kind of destroys people's well being.
There's
And like,
also an there's also an element of I don't want to say perfectionism, but it's like the one-upmanship kind of where like it gets to a point where kids, if they're not like top three or four on a team, they don't feel like they have any value. And that's huge because I hate to break it to everybody, but like every team has 12 kids, like that's a roster. So do you not think that we need a 5, 6, 7, 8? You need a 12 too.
Yeah.
I don't, there's so much pressure and it comes from unrealistic expectations. That's what kind of clicked when you said social media is like you're thinking more on the distraction end, but for me, there's so much like perfectionism on social media that kids are like, oh well, I'm not gonna hit 25 home runs this year, so why play? Like there's just so
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you just don't need to do that. You don't, I mean, I feel like, yeah, that's also another thing that social media causes. It causes like so much pressure because you'll see like, I guess the big teams like Oklahoma or Texas or whatever, they hit like their home runs, they hit all game, and like that's obviously not happening at every single team, every single level. And I guess like that pressure, like to perform like that, just like, I guess,
Yeah,
completely
it's
turns
unreal,
people away.
and it's unrealistic expectations, and guess where it starts? At home. Like it's huge. Like if you have an environment where the child isn't supported, it's just never going to work. So I mean, if you got to have the right system in place, and if it's not right at home, I mean, some people have mentors and all that, but you have to have something in place.
Yeah, every person has that. I mean, they should have that. Like, it's sadly most people who quit don't. But I mean, I also could say from like, I guess comparing sports, because I'll be in a slump and I'll look at someone who's playing like soccer or something that's like not so failure based, and I'll be like, well, they don't ever have to deal with this, but at the same time, you never know. Like, they might be struggling with the same thing, but like the pressure, like of being in a failure sport definitely like I
It
guess
ramps
turns
it up.
me yeah, it turns me away from the sport a little bit, but at the same time it's like your like favorite thing ever. But so like you can't quit it, but you stick with it even if it's like painful.
Learning how to fail is definitely the best part of softball or baseball. It is the only, like if I had to describe one thing, it would probably be the one thing is learning to fail. That's what the sport is all about. That's what it'll teach you in life. But you can obviously see where that would mess with the mental side of things because not many people know how to fail. Not many people learn how to fail. And I'll go back to it again. That usually starts where? At home. So
Yeah.
Once I kind of decided that I didn't want to play in college, I wasn't going to go past high school with it, sport actually became a lot more enjoyable for me because there wasn't the pressure of what are you going to do with it? Like, what are you going to do with the sport? What's the purpose of it? I was like, the purpose is to develop skills, have fun, meet people, just do the thing that I've loved to do my whole life. And it's a lot freeing once that pressure and everything is gone. I think I really kind of dodged a burnout there because I kind of felt like I was getting close to a burnout where there's too much pressure. I didn't like showing up. I didn't like the idea of failure and I thought I was going to fail every time. And it just kind of switched when the pressure of trying to get like thinking about getting recruited or just people having those like really high standards for me just kind of went away. So it's like it's my last year playing, and I'm just kind of like it matters to me, but it also on a big scale it doesn't.
Which
You
is
know?
honestly, I think that's a mindset that most people should have because even if you're deciding just to not play anymore and you want to finish it out to wherever you're at and you want to finish it through high school and you want to kind of close this chapter of your life, it shouldn't be something you kind of just give up on because that pressure of how should I perform for other people just to get me higher and go further doesn't exist anymore. And I think you really pinpointed the fact that you're kind of just playing for yourself, and that's something that we don't teach enough to younger athletes is that like they get put in the sport so the parent can live out their lifelong dreams. Like no, the kid's playing the sport for you, and it should be something you enjoy, and you shouldn't feel an intense sense of dread just like showing up to practice. And it hurts to see how kids get it so twisted on like, well, I'm committed or I'm not playing anymore, so why even bother? you bother just for you. Everything's for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you stop kind of like once I stopped playing to be better than other people or to be the best, I be the best like compared to other people, and I started playing just to get better within myself and to be the best that I can be. It it was wonderful. It was a great experience, honestly.
Yeah, separating others from you is the best way to pursue it. And I would say comparing yourself to other people is the worst thing any athlete can do because there's no matter what we want to say, there's always someone better. There's always going to be someone who's better at you at running or throwing or catching or hitting. And why should that matter to you? It should motivate you to work harder, yes, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter if they're better than you. As long as you focus on you, you'll be fine.
Like even when people what kids, I feel like kids don't understand youth players is that even the best of the best, the people they see in the media, like these star players and all these really big, good organizations, there's are people better than them. There's people that are coaching them, they're listening to them, they're taking advice from them, and they're still learning. Younger athletes always seem to think that like they're done. They're done learning, they're just playing. Like they're absolutely still building skills. They're still being coached. They're not done.
And that's like something you will see like any athlete from the start of their career to the end of their career will show like exponential growth from the rookie season up or and then as they get older obviously there's a downgrade just because of like just being older.
Biology.
Yeah, biology, things you can't avoid. But either way, like there's debate each year about who would win the MVP. Like there's always a comparison between two different players because both these players are super good, but they're good at different aspects of the sport, which is something that should be installed in young athletes because while may be better at you at this aspect of sport, you're better at them. So why focus on the fact that they're better at you than that when you're good yourself at your own thing?
Yeah, you gotta focus on what you like excel at, what you're good at. You just gotta remind yourself of that. When you see a player doing something that you want to do, like if you want to get better at a certain aspect, and you see a player that's really good at that, don't take that as, oh, they're better than me, I'm never gonna get to that, and just kind of be like, oh well, like that sucks for me. No, just set a goal for yourself to be like that, but don't lose the other aspect of your game. Just continue to want to be better.
Yeah, and on goal setting, like we have a visualization aspect in sports you can use. Like if you imagine your success in an attainable way, obviously, not to the extremes, but you
Yeah.
imagine in this situation you're in a game and you're down by one and you're up to bat. You just imagine you at least have a productive at bat for your team, and you imagine yourself succeeding. You imagine yourself getting that hit. You imagine yourself getting a walk, getting anything that's beneficial to the win, of course, or anything positive, and you will see that the more you visualize the positives instead of, oh, I might ground out in this situation, the more success you'll see. And that's like something you can just goal set in your mind, like, oh, my goal today is to positively think about my approach, or my goal today is to give myself a break if I mess up. And these little small goals can lead to bigger goals overall on like your success.
Yeah, there's so many people on teams that like say on like some of my teams, there's players that will go up to bat just right even right before they go up to bat, they're like thinking and they're talking about what's gonna happen if they mess up. And they're just not even acknowledging like, oh, what's gonna happen if I succeed, when I succeed. Like there's it's the mind. You gotta switch that mindset. You can't go up visualizing you messing up and being like, oh, that's gonna be so bad. I don't want that to happen. If you don't want it to happen, don't think about it. Don't
Yeah.
don't think it's gonna happen. You gotta think the other way.
No, I completely agree with that. And like, I mean, I guess I could say from personal experience, I'd be in a slump. I'd go up there thinking like, just imagine base hit up the middle. Nothing crazy, obviously. You don't want to
Yeah,
think,
absolutely.
obviously, if you are struggling, trying to put more pressure on yourself to do the greatest thing ever is never going to help you. And just the small things is important. Like, oh, I struck out last event, let's focus on putting the ball in play. Or you're an athlete in basketball, you like, I missed that last shot, let's focus on making the next one. Or I'm going to make the next one. Just that like constant sense of I'm going to do this, because thinking I'm not going to completely make you worse. Um,
Even before you even have to think about your next at bat, your next shot, you can just think of what can I do to pick my team back up, to pick it back up. Even because you only if you strike out, the energy level drops the slightest bit. You have to be in charge of picking that back up. Do something else. It doesn't have to be your next at bat. You could just say something to get back in the dugout. Hype everyone back up. Like in basketball, you can just try and do something on the defensive end now, because that's what's happening right now.
so I agree with that. Actually, I like that a lot. It's a big thing I put into my coaching is seeing failures as success, because everyone has to fail to succeed, even the greatest like inventors. So I have not failed 700 times. I have not failed once. I have succeeded in proving that those 700 ways will not work. And when I have eliminated the ways that will not work, I will find the way that will work. So this quote's by
Yeah.
Thomas Edison, and I mean, you were touching on this, but you could say like this, you put this into your sport and like, okay, so this time I failed, but I learned something new, and I learned how I would approach the situation the next time I see it, or I learned how to handle this failure and go back into that dugout and cheer on my next teammate, because that failure doesn't shape who I am, and it's honestly just helping me grow.
I've seen players on our teams that they have a bad at bat. They come in the dugout, and if they don't kind of pick themselves back up and start cheering, it can bring the entire team down within like the next batter or two.
Yeah, so like a
It can
ghost
happen
town.
so fast. Yeah. Especially if it's like an older player, a leader kind of player that just gets down on themselves, everybody else goes down with them. Like it's so hard to keep the spirits up if there are people who aren't,
Yeah,
who are being so negative.
and while like this doesn't exist in like that doesn't exist in solo sports, you could also say for solo sports it's more important for them to stay upbeat. It's more important to see failure as a success, because you have no one else there to pick you up. And I think it's very important in team sports as a leader to maintain that healthy failure mindset, but it's also important to individually focus on the fact that this failure shouldn't bring me down, and I shouldn't let this failure shape my next performance. And I think the best way to focus on that is to just always have this like disconnect from the sport and you mentally.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. I hope you feel like you learned something of value, and we'd love to hear feedback from you. Our email is in the original post. If you'd like to contact us, shoot us an email.